Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and laughter stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a comedy podcast to help you find your inspiration. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. So glad to be back. We are back, baby. In New York City, that is. We are back in Brooklyn. And Justina and I are very excited to be back home. We were down south for Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. And my birthday, and my mom's birthday. All a blessing. But we were away from the show, from the proper full episode show, and now we are back. Hope you are well, and we are back for a full episode. First full episode of the new year, and it is with best friend of the show, Rob, bro of the show, Trey, and girlfriend of the show, Justina. We are talking all that pop. We have a few pop culture topics that we are discussing in this episode. It was fun having them on. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, why don't we just get right to it? Here's my chat with Rob, Trey, and Justina. Well, thank you for coming back, the three of you, for another Pop Talk episode. We are joined by bro of the show, Trey.
Hello.
Best friend of the show, Rob.
Hello.
And girlfriend of the show, Justina.
Hello.
Hello. The Stooges, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Ask your grandparents, kids who are listening.
You can't. They got COVID.
Yeah, well, too close to home. Not for us, though. Okay, yeah. Well, we have a few topics that we are hitting up this week, and we just want to say thank you for listening again. This is our first full-length episode of the new year, 2021, coming in hot. Okay, so today we're going to talk about diversity in front of and behind the camera, reboots, revivals, and remakes, and also streaming services and how they release episodes. But we're going to start with Wonder Woman 1984, which came out right before Christmas. What did you think? Rob, I know you had some strong feelings at first. Why don't you go first?
I will say the easiest way I can share my feelings is to say I wish it was better.
Okay. So to put that into context, what do you think of the first one?
I like the first one. I thought the first one was good. The only thing I didn't like about the first one, obviously, was the villain was pretty weak. I thought Thulis was not the... I didn't like the villain. But I enjoyed the first one a lot. And things I really liked about the first one, obviously, was I thought Gal Gadot was excellent. And is she from? I always forget. Is it Amazonia? What's the name of the island she's from? The Mascara. That's right. I loved all the stuff with the Mascara.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I loved all that stuff. And Chris Pine was. I mean, I love that dude. So I thought he was great in the first one. Obviously there's some really awesome scenes, like when she, goes into the no man's land during World War I.
You cannot leave without helping them. These people are dying.
This is no man's land, Diana. It means no man can cross it, all right?
That part's amazing. Just she was really good at being the fish out of water. And I think that's probably one of the things I didn't like about 84 was she wasn't the fish out of water. And it was kind of like they had tried to do Chris Pine was the fish out of water in this one.
That's just a trash can.
It's just a trash can. Yeah.
And it was okay. I just really felt like I didn't really enjoy the villains. I felt like it felt like Batman Forever. It just felt like the same plot idea was that, it was basically kind of somebody who works with with Diana, just like, Jim Carrey kind of works for Wayne Industries, and then they come up with some wacky thing that they're going to use. And because of that wacky thing, they gain powers, and then they completely, go from being this big nerdy person to being this ultra villain. And I don't know, I just wasn't happy with it. I wasn't happy with the CGI at the end, the way that they made Kristen Wiig look. It just looked bad to me. And I don't know. I just felt like, okay, here's this, stereotypical nerdy woman, and now she's this badass cheetah. And it just, I didn't like the way that they went with her. And then I was really disappointed with Pedro Pascal.
Life is good, but it can be better.
I love that man so much. And it's not
just... You didn't think he did a good job in it? Or you didn't like the...
I didn't like the character. I thought he was fine. I just didn't like the character. I just felt like it was I told somebody else, I just felt like it was a waste of him. Like, when you see him on something like Game of Thrones or, Narcos. He was so good on shows like that it just felt like, I don't know. I just, just how many times could he yell Alistair? And just the whole, I don't know. I just didn't like the idea of a villain that just, I didn't like him as a villain. Like, he really wasn't a villain. He was just a really selfish dick. And so, it was like a moral story. And I don't know. I just didn't feel like, it felt like, it didn't have a central idea to me. It was like, and then his powers didn't make sense to me, and the wishing, and it just all like, it felt like mumbo jumbo. And so and maybe because I'm not familiar with Wonder Woman as the comic, maybe that was canonical to it, and I didn't know that, but it just felt pretty hokey.
No. Well,
yeah, okay.
I'll say, as someone who enjoyed the movie, I didn't love it like I loved the first one. All four of us really enjoyed the first one.
Yeah.
This one did feel convoluted in parts. It felt like there was a lot of story getting stuffed in. It isn't the worst of the movies that have too much story or a lot of story that can be hard to interweave. I think it did a decent job trying to interweave it and address things. I just think some threads maybe just needed to be lost because it didn't necessarily support the whole movie or just didn't necessarily work. But I did think Kristen Wiig was good in the role. I do see the Batman Forever connection, by the way. But just like Batman Forever, Jim Carrey's great in Batman Forever.
Oh,
and
he's awesome in it.
Yeah. And Pedro's storyline, it felt like they hit all the beats. However, it felt a little undercooked. There was something about that. It just seemed like it needed a little bit more time in the oven to bake. And I did find a lot of the stuff with the wishing thing and like some of the rules that they established early on. I didn't see the execution of those things so well executed, particularly with the stuff with Chris Pine. So it wasn't a disappointing movie for me, and I can't remember exactly how I rank it. I still rank it out of the DCEU, out of the top 5. It's in the top 5 because it's still better than
so many bad ones.
Everything's better in Suicide Squad, and Batman versus Superman is not strong at all, and Aquaman really is not strong. I don't care what anyone says. That movie is cheesy as all hell.
People say Aquaman was the greatest of them all. I mean, some people say Aquaman's the best of them all, and like a sizable chunk, and I don't understand.
Wonder Woman. Yeah, it's clearly the first, and maybe that's the problem with this one, is that Wonder Woman was hands down the best of the DCEU. So I mean, it had a lot of, unfortunately, it had a lot to prove.
Well, I think,
and I feel like a sexist saying that.
Well, I think that the DCEU has this problem of two different members of the fan base. You have the people who also like Marvel movies, in other words, also like well-executed superhero movies. And then people who will fall for the, like, cheesy stuff that's in there just for the sake of being in there type stuff. Like, I don't know, like a Fast and the Furious crowd.
We're family. We got a problem, we deal with it together.
I think you've got both in the audience for a DCEU movie, and the Marvel fans will say Wonder Woman, and the latter will say that it's Aquaman, and they won't appreciate the Wonder Woman movies as well. But still, that's how I feel about it. Trey, I know you have points. What do you feel about it?
So just for context for the folks listening, Jason posted on his Facebook his ranking of DCEU movies, and pretty much what he just said, that Wonder Woman 84 is still better than the rest. And then Rob wrote, "I've got thoughts." So I asked to go after them because I thought I would be this mediator in between, but I'm really going to be parroting now a lot of what they've both said, because really every piece of criticism that Rob said is 100% accurate, but I enjoyed it. And it's an example of a movie where, because of the actors and getting the emotion right, it can overcome the deficiencies of the movie. Whereas you look at, I mean, there are movies that make the same mistakes, or TV shows that make the same mistakes that I rail on, because they don't execute it as well as 84 was executed, just, you know, within the context of having made the mistakes. But to your point about it not being fully cooked, I know that the theme that Patty Jenkins, according to an interview she gave, the theme she was going for is the don't cut corners sort of thing. And that's why she had the Amazon competition thing at the beginning. And she actually had to fight DC to keep that in, because they were saying you either have to cut that or you have to cut the mall scene. And she was like,
"That's
no,
insane.
We need both."
That was the best part of the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I loved that part.
Yeah, and it's in part because the Amazon stuff was great in both movies, and that's part of what she was saying, is that it was great. But for anyone who didn't watch the first one, you still need that kind of introduction. And what she was going for was the lesson that Diana learned as a little girl, was the don't cut corners, and you have to learn to become a hero the whole way. And that was supposed to tie into her speech at the end.
You cannot be the winner because you are not ready to win.
You can only have the truth. And the truth is enough. The truth is beautiful.
But for me, at least, it didn't fully come back around. It wasn't full circle in the sense that she wasn't really cutting corners at the end with Steve. Like, once she accidentally made the wish and there's Steve, she's trying to figure out how to fix it and not be too quick about it. They tried to play it as though she's trying to have her cake and eat it too, but I don't really think that's what they nailed. I think it nailed her trying to do right and just eventually having to give it up. And because of the fact that the wishing, and Rob, you're right, the rule for the wishes didn't make sense.
Didn't follow that.
And they didn't explain it early enough. So you didn't know that you lose something when you make the wish early enough to understand what the hell's happening, especially with Maxwell Lord.
Relinquishing your wish was supposed to work was very loose.
I renounce my wish.
Yeah, you just say it off into the wind.
And was he like, basically, he was going to die if people didn't wish? Was that basically what we're supposed to understand?
Yeah, because you lose, apparently you lose the thing most dear to you when you get your wish granted. And so for him, it was his health. And the more wishes he was getting, the sicker he got. And so he had to use everyone else's power
I guess
fix his health.
I thought Alistair was the most dear to him. So I guess that was confusing to me. I thought it was just pushing it to where he was going to lose Alistair.
But that goes back to they didn't have that set up right. A, they didn't explain the rules right.
No.
And B, they didn't really push what was near and dear to him most. Like, we found out 2/3 of the way into the movie, I think. And so, but anyway, what I think he was doing was trying to use everyone else's power. That's why he made himself the stone, the wishing stone, was so that he could use their powers from their wishes to heal him. Which I guess he knew that his dearest thing to him was his health. So he knew that was what he would have to fix. But then why everyone else gets their literal wish. Kristen Wiig first gets Diana's powers without even knowing.
I don't understand why she even got a second wish.
Because Maxwell Lord gave it to her or something weird like that. I don't know.
There's a lot of issues.
Yeah, but they get their literal wishes, but Diana gets Steve, but it's quantum leap. Like she doesn't really get Steve. Like none of that stuff made sense, and it didn't really tie in well, and it's a lot of bad stuff in a movie that feels better because of the performances.
It kind of reminds me of that line from Community of Abed's about Johnny Depp. Is he a good bad actor or a bad good actor? This movie falls on I think it's a weaker good movie.
But again, because of the performances, if you go based off the script, I think it's
muddled. A lot of things not clear. Execution is what helps, but I don't think I don't care who was executing it. There's no perfect way to execute such an imperfect script.
Right. And I think even Lord, even him, once he got to the point where he understood he could heal himself by taking other people's powers, he still got cartoonishly power hungry, where he wants every wish in the world, and he wants every world leader bowing down to him. It's like, this is just some guy who's got Ponzi schemes, who somehow knows about this wishing rock, knows everything about it, knows how it works, knows where to go.
Yeah,
it's like, I mean,
I just thought he was kind of like, he was like Donald Trump, but paid attention in history class.
That's exactly what I thought too. Well, Justina, I know you didn't see the movie, but why don't you chime in anyway?
Nah. See it. Honestly, it got enough reviews, that I don't think I want to spend 2.5 hours watching it, to be honest. And I really liked the first one, and I don't feel a need to watch one that might make me not like Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And this maybe we won't go on to this subject yet, but do you feel as a woman, like, do you feel like any type of like responsibility to support a movie like this, because it is directed by a woman, it does start a woman?
Interesting.
Do you feel like there's like, I should probably watch this just because we don't get these types of opportunities?
Right. Oh, that's such a good question, and I feel zero of that, especially because, like, I don't know, I have these streaming services, I'm not giving them anything except time. It's not given to them, it's taken away from me. I'm not buying a ticket to see this movie.
Yeah.
And also I don't know that you're so into comic book and superhero movies that you need to see representation in them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could see if a woman who's super into comic books, she might have said yes to that question, but if maybe, it's something where it's like, I don't care one way or the other.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in how this movie went the way that it went, because Patty Jenkins is obviously a great filmmaker, and she did a great job with the first movie. Rob, to your point, Gal Gadot is perfect as Wonder Woman. I think one thing that people don't point out is that we saw her first as the grizzled person in Batman vs. Superman, the kind of not as cynical as Bruce.
If we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty.
But the cynical, worldly, been there, done that person.
This thing is from another world. My world.
I've killed things from other worlds before.
And then she had to go backwards in time and play the naive version of that same person.
You're a man.
And we're catching up to her Batman versus Superman self. And Justice League self. So what she's doing is tremendous.
Yeah.
So was there some studio meddling, which studios in general do that, but obviously we've seen through the course of the DCEU a lot of studio meddling. Is that
Ray Fisher?
Yeah. Is that what happened here, or was it just a bad concept not done fully well, or maybe a solid concept not executed well, or what happened?
Which we've seen through the DCEU. Kind concept's not being executed super well. Also, to your point about Gal Gadot, 4 directors have directed her in that role, right? No, 3.
Snyder, Jenkins, Whedon.
I guess it's 3. Yeah.
3.
Yeah. I mean, it's 3 different people have directed her in all these different films, and yeah, she's done a really great job. Speaking of these other directors and this other movie, the Justice League Snyder Cut is coming out. Just quickly, how excited is anyone to see that, Trey?
I've actually become more excited the more I've learned about it. And I'm not some Snyder stan. Mm-hmm. I do like him as a guy. Jason and I have talked offline that every time I see him in something, I see why the casts have gotten behind him in his vision, because he's somebody where he's just infectious in a positive way, even when there are things maybe a little bit wrong with the movies he's done. But hearing what his vision was for this movie, it's the better approach. Now, whether or not you can actually pull off Justice League the way he wants to do it at this point in time, timing is the main issue, I think, with his movies. I mean, he's had his own mistakes he's made. But I do think that DC trying to catch up to Marvel, which isn't possible, by the way. You have to actually do the storytelling. But that mentality, I think, is the main thing that hurt Snyder's movies. But I think his idea for what this movie should be was the right one. And seeing some of the footage that was cut does make me a bit more excited to see it.
Justina, did you see Justice League, the original?
No.
Okay. So are you at all interested in seeing the Snyder Cut?
I mean, it's going to be long, right?
Yeah.
Well.
Yep.
Yeah, they're planning. I keep hearing different things about how they're even going to release it. They're saying it'll be 2 movies. It'll be 4 different episodes. No, it's just going to be one long movie. It's like that's one of the things people complained about the not Snyder cut of these films. So maybe doing it really long is not the way to do it. Rob, what about you? Are you excited to see this?
Well, I'll watch it because I actually didn't get. I didn't finish Justice League because I just was like,
yeah,
sorry.
That's how I feel.
Yeah,
I want to see it.
I want to see it, and and like Trey said, I have a lot of respect for Zack Snyder. I actually, I've told you before, the opening of Dawn of the Dead is one of my favorite openings to a horror movie ever. And so I think he's got a lot of talent. And I actually kind of like Sucker Punch.
You're the one.
Yeah, I
haven't seen it, so I can't talk trash about it. But
there's just some really cool sequences in it. I mean, it doesn't.
He's really good at that. He's gotten an amazing eye. I think he should be a cinematographer or co-director.
Yeah, or he just needs a writer. He needs an Aaron Sorkin writer who thinks he can do. You know what I mean? Like who's a little more involved than the average writer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, next topic. There's been some talk about how streaming services release episodes. Dropping entire seasons at once got popular because it allowed people to binge. But the creators of The Mandalorian saw that releasing them like old school TV style, 1 episode a week, sparked interest and drew out the fascination with Baby Yoda.
Grogu.
How do you feel about this? Should all streaming services do their shows 1 episode a week, the way shows like WandaVision have adopted? Or should they drop them all at once? Let's start with you, Justina.
I think that I like it that different streaming services do different things. I don't want all of them to do any one thing only. And I actually, like, even though it's like so frustrating, because we're spoiled rotten nowadays with instant gratification, to wait week over week to see Grogu grow up, and like bond with Mando. Like, I appreciated that I got to enjoy that show and be excited about it for like 2.5 months or however long, I think, it was about that long because it was like mid-October to end of December. And so that's what I think about it. But, I love a good binge. you know.
Yeah.
But the only thing about the binge is like the people ruining it for you because some people can binge faster than others.
Yeah.
Rob, thoughts?
Yeah, I like weekly, but I think because of our age and what we liked is that 9 o'clock on Sunday was HBO's time, or 8 o'clock on Thursdays was Lost, and that was the time you got to watch the show. And I think that was when you could control the zeitgeist, and when you could control the conversation. It was when everybody was watching at 9 o'clock or everybody was watching at 8 o'clock. When it's, you can watch it at 3 o'clock in the morning. I can watch it on Saturday at 2, and somebody can watch it still on Sunday at 5 o'clock. You just don't get that live viewing experience. So I don't see the point in releasing weekly because, yes, you can, you do have that, you have to wait for the next episode. And if you're like me, like with The Boys or with Mando, I was definitely watching it as soon as I could. I didn't want it to get spoiled. But but I think back about like with Game of Thrones, I just had to watch it 9 o'clock. So that's when you watched it. And if you were really into it. So I would just rather them release the whole thing. But but unless they were going to do some type of, this is the time it comes on. And I don't see, maybe, I guess the way I look at it is it just drags out people who get the free week of a service, and so they know that they have to. You either wait till all the episodes drop, or you've got to keep paying for the service. Versus, just go ahead and watch the whole story. But I guess for me, it's just slowly starting to miss how it's going to be like that, where we're just not going to, and everybody's not going to be tuning in at the same time to see, does Tony Soprano get killed, which he did. That's why I went black. Don't at me, bro. But he's dead. But no, I there's like that. There was that time when we could all watch together, and it's just I don't know if the once a week is really you get the same type of conversation.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's definitely a different conversation now. Trey, what are your thoughts?
I guess I'm more in line with Justina, where do you. whatever way you want to do it. But in terms of my consumption, I've leaned more towards taking smaller bites, because I did a little bit of the binging. So I watched Arrow completely out of order. I watched the third season was when I really started watching, because that's the same season that The Flash came on. Flash. So I watched them once a week. And then in the summer, I was like, I need to go back and catch up on this. So I was binging seasons 1 and 2 of Arrow. And what I noticed was I did not remember what happened in those 2 seasons nearly as well as how I remember stuff in other shows that I watched the old school way.
Yeah.
Because you failed the city. Because you failed the city.
Yes, I have. And I need to run Barry to watch the next one. But I want to be able to absorb what happened and understand what's going on in the series. And there were actually studies back then that talked about exactly what I'm saying, where you don't absorb it the same, and you can't understand and analyze it the same way. And the other thing that you miss when you're binging is the anticipation. Like Rob, what you were talking about, this was the time to watch Lost. You had a week to kind of be like, yeah, I can't wait for the next episode. And there was more excitement in watching that, I think, than in binging the whole thing and then having to wait a year for the next.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where my opinion comes in. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was going to say, it's kind of like two different things, because it's like one aspect of it, it's kind of like, I'm not going to watch the AFC Championship today. I watched it yesterday. So, because it's live and you want to watch it.
Right.
But then I think about like the way I read books, though, is if I've, like the last 2 books that I've read, I've stayed up till way too late with 2 small children. I'm an idiot because I wanted to finish it. So I'm like, so I binge read. When I read something, I'm reading it as fast as I can, especially when I'm into it. So there is like that longing for that shared experience versus Once Daddy gets a taste, he can't stop. So
yeah, and I do like, the water cooler's been taken away a lot by how things are done. But
I disagree. It's just Twitter now.
Yeah.
Yes and no, but what I mean is there's not that same, because it's not the same kind of conversation,
right?
Where it's a deeper dive. It's more just the 160 whatever characters. And
they'll do a thread.
Yeah,
it's what is it? 280 now?
Yeah, 280. But
280. Yeah,
it's not. I'm trying to think the right way to explain it, but we're not having the same kind of shared experience
when we're not watching it at the same time. Right.
It's like when we all have that same moment when they open up the hatch. It's like we were all watching it at the same time.
Right. So, so that's where I think releasing once a week, because even though this isn't the time that The Mandalorian airs, this is the time that it's dropped. And a large chunk of people are trying to watch it as soon as possible. And then you still are kind of joining the conversation. And I think that helps add to it also. I mean, I understand that you've got folks who try to binge the whole thing immediately and they're talking about it, but they're also, like Justina said, spoiling it for the folks who can't, who maybe are responsible.
There are a lot of people not engaged in that conversation because they're avoiding it.
Right.
It's like Stranger Things. Like, I mean, it was pretty much ruined for me that Bob got killed in that second season. Sorry if I spoiled it for anybody. But yeah, Sean West.
The second season. Well,
yeah, yeah,
I do lean towards liking the old school way of them dropping it one episode a week, but it depends on the show. For The Mandalorian, I want it once a week.
In WandaVision, I'm kind of liking once a week.
I think so as well, because you can absorb it more. As someone who binged Breaking Bad, first 1 or 2 seasons of Mad Men, I caught up with those shows before whatever season was on, because I did start watching those shows when they were still doing new ones. And Lost, I did the same with Lost. I just binged it, and what I realized is I didn't absorb things as much as people who were watching it every week. There were things that went over my head, or I just didn't notice, because right after finishing one episode, I went to the next one. So I got the big stuff, but not the little moments. And shows like those three, especially Mad Men and Breaking Bad, had little moments that you had to really pay attention to. Justina and I, this past year, we watched The Wire, but we would watch 2-3 episodes max. We wouldn't watch an entire season in a night or a day or something like that. So it allowed us to absorb it more and talk about it, and then we'd watch more.
That's what I did with the Marvel Netflix shows.
Would you? Oh, well, we did end up watching some out of order by accident. Is that what happened?
Yeah, and
didn't you watch season 2 or no?
It was because multiple people are using the same account, and so when you just click play, you don't realize.
Yeah.
And we were like, "What the hell? no wonder people say this season is bad." Like, it's because we started on episode 10 when we should have been watching episode 2. The other thing I'll say is, when you watch a show that drops all of their episodes of a season one day, you have to wait way longer for that next season. And I don't like that as much. Like, let them make the show in the time they're going to make the show. Give it to us in little bits. And not have to wait a whole year or whatever crazy thing you have to wait for just to see the next season. Because then it's like, okay, what happened? Like, I need that recap that they do at the beginning.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. It's like, I like, one thing I loved about like Mad Men and Breaking Bad and a lot of these shows was, obviously I would watch the episode and then I would go to the AV Club, or I would go to Grantland Ringer and read the people I liked readings. Recaps and theories, especially with Breaking Bad. There's so many theories about where are we going with this. It's, what's going to happen, or reading stuff about Mad Men and like all of the things, because I'm not that smart, like what all the things that I'm missing. So then when later on I can talk about Mad Men, I can seem intelligent because I'm just ripping off other people's thoughts. But I miss like weekly recaps, and that being part of the culture too. I'm not going to read a recap of The Mandalorian. Well, no, maybe like Stranger Things. I'm not going to read a recap of Stranger Things because I just binged it. So
right.
I don't see the point in it versus reading a recap of like, oh, this is what happened on Mandalorian. And I did do that a little bit, but it's just, there's just something about that weekly time. And then, like if I watch Breaking Bad at 9, more than likely at 10:30, Andy Greenwald's going to have something on the ringer about, Breaking Bad. And so I miss reading that.
Yeah, I actually, with Daredevil and those shows, I actually didn't watch more than 2 episodes in a week. And then I would go read, like IMDb trivia or something like that about the episodes because I wanted to absorb it, even though the whole thing dropped. I'm not trying to binge the whole thing.
What were you about to say, Justina?
Just that, like the time that a show would come on. Like, I love to watch shows with people. I don't really like to watch stuff by myself. And so now that anybody can access it at any time, I am so upset constantly. Like, Brighton watches something that I want. My sister watches something that I wanted to watch with her. You watch something. I mean, you don't really, but you know what I mean? Like, you have that ability.
I learned.
I want to watch it with you now and experience it for the first time with you experiencing it for the first time at the same time. And now, like, people can just do whatever they want.
Yeah, that really pisses me off about your guys' relationship. Because I'll be like, Jason, have you watched this? He's like, well, no, me and Justina are going to watch it together. And I'm like, get the fuck on it.
Yeah. I still have the last episode of The Good Place to watch because I was like saving it for Justina.
No, but
Justina was like, "Oh, you don't have to."
I've given you permission to watch.
Yeah,
that.
you did, but there was a long time of not watching it because I didn't know I had that permission.
You need to have a healthy relationship like me and my wife where we don't watch anything together and we like it. I watched one episode of Bridgerton and I was like, I'm out. So
we binged that hard. Speaking of binging,
I have not seen. Justina and her family watched that, and I'm fine with it. Yeah. Let's talk reboots, revivals, and remakes. They have been all the rage for several years now in TV and film. I know, right? Many thought that relaunching the latest Spider-Man franchise came too soon after the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, which came out shortly after the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. When does it make sense to have a reboot or revival or remake? Trey, let's start with you.
So, I'd pose this question to you off camera, and it's in part because I keep seeing literally every time, there's some kind of revival, reboot, whatever. Something with the same brand name as something that came out before. Inevitably, you have the deluge of comments in the articles that say, oh, Hollywood, can't you come up with an original idea? And the real answer is it depends as to whether or not it makes sense. It's not the most fun answer for a podcast where you want more debate, but it really does depend. And I don't think what I've come to realize, based on all the different things that have worked and that haven't, when I was predicting right, when I was predicting wrong, is there is no formula to this. But what made me wonder this, I've always wondered this, but I wondered it even more recently because of Walker on the CW. And typically that's the kind of thing where the studio's mindset, their formula is to take, hey, here's this thing that had a brand name in the past, and we're going to update it because there's so much content out there, we need the brand name to be able to cut through the clutter. So that's really the reason why they're doing all this stuff. And so Walker, Texas Ranger made me question, do people now, in 2020 and 2021, actually know this brand if you're under a certain age?
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, that's the same thing I said about the 18 movie. And it's something that comes up with a lot of these, is that there's some old property that the kids they're trying to appeal to now don't know anything about. They maybe didn't hear anything about it. Yes, Batman is something that everyone knows about, so you can reboot that.
I'm Batman.
You can reboot Spider-Man. Walker, Texas Ranger? I don't know. Miami Vice? Even it's the same dude. He made a movie version of the show. People didn't know the show who were kids at that time. You know, it just it works when it works, and that's an unfair answer because there've been so many times beforehand where I thought
there's always
that's
an
not going to
exception
work,
to the rule.
and it did.
You know, there's always an exception to the rule.
Right.
And I would say case in point is obviously, you know, one of the #1 shows on Netflix is Cobra Kai. And it's awesome. I love it.
Right. I love it. One of the big shows in the zeitgeist. And, you know, I was wrong about that. And I was wrong about 21 Jump Street. I was like, who?
Oh my God, I love 21 Jump Street.
So 21 Jump Street, I think, worked in part because it was kind of spoofing the original while also spoofing the concept of reboots.
Right.
We're reviving a canceled undercover police program from the 80s and revamping it. The guys in charge of this stuff lack creativity and are completely out of ideas.
Like Saved by the Bell reboot that's going on.
The Saved by the Bell reboot, which is fun.
Well, Saved by the Bell I put in a slightly different category because that's still
more of a revival?
It's syndicated all over the place still. So people still have...
Same with Full House.
Yeah, so people are still exposed to it. And that's where, like, Roseanne, before she got herself fired off her own show, that made sense to me because it's still syndicated all over
but
the
Murphy
place. Murphy Brown made no sense to me because...
I didn't even watch a second of it.
Right. And then it wasn't good either, the revival of Murphy Brown. But Will and Grace made sense because, not because it was syndicated as much, but that election video that they did went viral.
Everyone said I was going to see Viggo Mortensen's wiener in Eastern Promises, but it's a fight scene, so it's really hard to nail down.
No, I'm talking about Trump.
Oh, sorry. Talking about the wrong dick.
How do you know that Donnie is one of my oldest friends? I helped him pick out Melania.
Brad and Angelina announced their divorce the same week my relationship ends? Selfish. Why does everything in there look 10 years old?
Talk about a basket of deplorables.
And it made everyone who loved the show say, "Oh my God, they haven't aged and they haven't lost
I want
a beat."
to see it again.
Yeah. So things like that make sense, but then MacGyver didn't make sense to me. If MacGyver had been the son of, I would have understood it. And if Magnum P.I. had been the son or daughter of, I would have understood it. But that's not the way they went. And again, who out of their target audience knew of those brands?
Right.
But those two are still kicking on CBS, and I don't know why, because I actually don't think they're that good.
You know, I keep thinking about, it's like they've got Equalizer coming out now, and it's like, okay, most people are just thinking it's the female version of the Denzel movie because they don't realize Equalizer was a television show, you know. And so, and not that I love Queen Latifah, so cool, go for it. But I mean, I'd rather just see her play that character from Set It Off again. But you know, it's like like there's just so many things that it's like, oh, this kind of worked in the 80s, and let's go for this, or let's try it. Whereas something like, I think Cobra Kai is, you know, there's a lot of people like me that just absolutely loved Karate Kid and obsessed about the fact that the kick was illegal and he shouldn't have kicked him in the face. And what would Johnny Lawrence be like? And when you really watch the movie, you're like, I don't know, Daniel's kind of a dick, and he kind of starts some of this stuff, and Johnny's just kind of defending himself. So it was a great idea of, you've always thought this guy was this, you know, typical jerk, and maybe there's more to him. And that was a great way to reboot and revival versus
Lone Ranger. Lone Ranger made no sense because the people who liked Lone Ranger were just so out of the film-going experience. And there was, at that time, cowboy movies were box office poison and had been for a couple of decades.
Was this
so
the
it
Army
really made no
Hammer
sense.
Yeah.
What'd you say, Justina?
Army Hammer.
Yeah, that was with Army Hammer and Johnny Depp.
I think they could, if they had found a way to execute Lone Ranger properly and not lean so heavily on the brand, maybe it could have worked.
I felt like they said, hey, John Peters, I don't think he's involved in this. It was like, hey, how can we redo Wild Wild West but worse?
Right.
Giant mechanical spider that they wouldn't let me put into the Superman movies.
Yeah. But I mean, and then you think about like reboots and revivals that just did not work. And I'm sorry to say, it's Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was terrible. I hated it, and I really wanted
a lot watching that movie, but
I didn't laugh at all. Like I did not find any of it funny, and I hate that. And maybe there's some stuff.
Well, I know that you love both of you love the actors in it.
Yeah.
I love, and that's
it's
not
the
them.
conception, because I
The
think
conception. It was really poorly made.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to tell when you should do that next generation, as I put my air quotes up, version. You know, like I was saying, I thought MacGyver should have been, versus just rebooting the whole thing. But I did think Ghostbusters, because of what it was, made more sense to do a next generation of Ghostbusters, and it could have been the same cast.
It could have absolutely been the same cast.
And I understand that Dan Aykroyd tried to write a script that was that concept and it didn't work, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater because his script didn't work. And obviously the new Ghostbusters Afterlife that's going to come out with Paul Rudd actually is the next generation concept, and it looks like it's hitting the right stuff.
Call it fate, call it luck, call it karma. I believe that everything happens for a reason.
But I agree with Rob. It just wasn't executed well. It was more of the recent Ghostbusters movie was more of a remake than a reboot. And it was lesser.
And you can't do a remake of a classic.
Right.
And expect it to go well.
And the CGI looked worse than the practical effects in the original.
Yeah. Justina, what are your thoughts on reboots and revivals? Does it excite you when you hear that stuff is coming back, or are you just like, why?
No, it depends on what it is, and sometimes it does excite me. I'm trying to think of an example where like something was coming back and I was like, oh snap, this is coming back, it's gonna be awesome.
Did you like Gilmore Girls?
No.
Right, because I like the revival.
Oh, I can think of an example. Like anything Sex in the City, like, you know, that she's doing like a reboot, I guess, you know, where are they now? And like, I'm just like so psyched about it. Like, I can't wait, you know, and like they could overkill it, saturate it. Like I would always be there, you know? So when you're a diehard fan, you know, you obviously have, a certain bias. And also like you guys make like really good points about timing and stuff like that. And it's interesting to hear what you guys are saying about that. But when I saw this topic on the list of things we were going to talk about, I was like, I don't know, immediately I thought of that Steve Martin quote, be so good they can't ignore you.
But I always say, be so good they can't ignore you. If somebody's thinking, how can I be really good? People are going to come to you.
And like, as it applies to this, like timing don't matter, you know, like none of that matters if it's awesome. Like Spider-Man came out way too soon and was the best thing ever. He's the best Spider-Man ever. And I'm so glad it's out. I'm so glad they didn't wait because he would have been too old to be Spider-Man. He's so perfect. You know, I don't know. Like,
amen. Yeah, no, totally you're absolutely right about that. I totally agree with that.
And that's what I think is lazy about most of the public conversation about it, and why maybe listeners think we sound wishy-washy about it because we're not taking a full stance. But it really is case by case.
Yeah.
But most people writing about it are either, oh, it's the lazy thing, or, oh, it's the best thing ever because I love this. And really, you need to evaluate each project for itself and what concept they have wrapped around it.
Yeah, what they're trying to do.
To Justina's point, we watched the pilot of Saved by the Bell reboot together, the three of us, and it was amazing.
It's better than the original show.
So fun.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and I keep thinking about like this, and I don't know if this is still true, but like it used to be that the most filmed character, I think, was Sherlock Holmes at one point. And he had the most films and adaptations ever. I could be wrong, but at one point that was that. And I think it's back to Sherlock, and that was when that show came out. It was like a revelation. It was so awesome. I mean, it gave us Cumberbatch. It gave us Cumberbatch, but you know, it's like, but that was, I mean, And then just to go to show that was amazing. And then I didn't even give a second to Elementary. It looked terrible to me. Like versus Sherlock.
I watched Elementary in the beginning because I thought it was going to be horrible, so I wanted to see how bad and how horrible it was.
Lucy Lou's, though.
Well, yeah.
All you Beyonce's.
But it was actually a solid show. I liked, and the fact that it was a New York thing didn't take. I thought that was one of the things I was going to not like about Elementary. But I actually liked what they did with that show. I think what they did is difficult to pull off, though. You change too much, usually it's going to come out not just pissing people off, but also not necessarily being good. And I think that's where a lot of these reboots go wrong is, especially when they're just hanging their hats on the brand name, is that they're using the brand that might bring in the people who loved it in the 80s. But they're not actually doing what people loved about it in the 80s. And the people from now that they're going after don't know anything about it. And all you're doing in your promotions is the nostalgia. So you're not bringing in the new people either. The worst, raise your hand if you actually remember this movie or cartoon, Jim and the Holograms.
I didn't know it.
I didn't
know it. And that's a perfect example of what you're talking about.
I didn't see a second of the movie, but I remember the preview, and I watched the show as a kid. I think even Molly Ringwald is in the remake or the live action movie.
I, Jerica Benton, am living the most unexceptional life. My sister Kimber and I live with our Aunt Bailey and her 2 foster kids. We all wish that we could just become someone else.
You are no longer Jerica. Jem, that's what we call you now.
It's like, who was that for?
Yeah, I wasn't a regular viewer of the cartoon, but I saw a few episodes. And the premise, for those who don't know, in the cartoon, is that the main character was a superhero whose secret identity was the lead singer of this band. And so that's what made it interesting, was that. The movie did none of that.
Yeah.
No, it was just like, it was basically about a YouTube star who gets jaded by the music industry, you know? It's like,
yeah, why even do it that way if you're going to use that property?
Right.
But I will say there were a bunch of 30-something-year-old dudes saying, oh, they messed this up. And I was thinking, well, they weren't trying to make it for you, obviously. Like when I saw the trailer, I thought, that's clearly being made for teenage girls.
Which is why we asked the question, why call it Jim and the Holograms? They could have called it Susie and the Friends.
I say if they did the actual, the actual Jim and the Holograms story, but made it for teenage girls, then I wouldn't have had a problem. Seeing that trailer, I kind of assumed that's where they were going. It ends up that they didn't. But, you know, I didn't have a problem with that. Rob, did you have any other thoughts about?
Well, no, I was just going to say, but maybe that movie ends where she goes back to her apartment and then Samuel Jackson's there and he's like, so you're Jim and the Hologram. Welcome to the Avengers.
Yeah, but they made that same mistake with a lot of stuff, particularly in the 2000s, I think.
Yeah.
Like Bewitched.
Yeah, and even shows where they brought like a foreign property to the U.S., like Prime Suspect. NBC tried to do that.
Outsourced.
Outsourced. At least outsourced on paper looked like the original movie. But Prime Suspect was nothing like the original. Like the character wasn't the same. The name of the show and maybe the name of the character was all that it had in common with the actual Helen Mirren show.
Or like Broadchurch. Like why even like do that one? It was like so close. Yeah.
So if you're gonna use that name, I know you have to change some stuff like The Office. You have to change some stuff to suit that market and the sensibilities of those people, but you can't change it so much that
this is not even the same thing.
Right.
Right. Well, I will say that at least like Bewitched as a concept wasn't bad. It just the execution didn't end up working.
No.
If you liked Bewitched and want to see an updated version, WandaVision.
I was going to say, I think WandaVision, yeah.
WandaVision is great. All right, final topic. diversity in front of and behind the camera. Many productions have put diverse faces on screen, and then people recognized that wasn't good enough because the voice didn't match the face of these diverse communities. Now we're seeing more diversity, but recently Shonda Rhimes pointed out that she was one of only a few straight people who had LGBTQ characters in their shows. Should more be done by people who are not of a community, or do you think they'd get a lot wrong? And we're especially talking about people in positions like Shonda Rhimes. Should showrunners and executive producers be developing stories around people who are not in their worldview, or should I say perspective there? And if so, how do they do that well? Justina, do you want to tackle this first, bravely?
It's a hard one for me, but like if the majority of the people in any position of power are white men, just for example, they have no choice if they want to foster diversity but to highlight those voices that aren't their own, you know, and it's so hard. Like we're talking about diversity at work, you know, right now. It's like a big conversation we're having because we're all white and young and just the same versions of each other. And and we're like, how do we do this? And like, we're having conversations and they're good, but like, we're all the same person having these conversations. I'm like, let's get somebody in here who's different to talk about it. But that she, like when we read that article that you sent about what Shonda Rhimes had said, I was like, oh man, that's a good point. Like we shouldn't wait until a gay person, for example, is in this producer position to put gay people into these roles, into these stories. Because if we wait for that, we might be waiting quite a long time, you know, unfortunately. And so I really like that she made that point. Like we straight people need to lift up these queer voices in the same way white people need to lift up the voices of people of color, you know? And so, I don't know. That was a good point that she made that I think not a lot of people think about. Or, I mean, honestly, I wasn't thinking about that. So I'm glad that I read that article.
That's a really good point. And I'm glad you highlighted that because, yes, it would take too long if we waited until people were in the position to... Like, there's so much that has to be done behind the scenes as far as who's getting hired in these roles and in these positions. But the people who have these roles now that they can make a show and get it on the air just because they're a big name, they should try to be diverse. And I know there are a lot of people who are going to complain about the product because they're saying the voice is going to be wrong, or it should be written by a person, or it should be cast by it should be cast with a person who is exactly like that particular thing. And that's a discussion that's being had right now about should straight actors play gay actors, and there are a couple of gay actors who said, yeah, it's acting, and there's been some wonderful performances by straight people who are playing gay people. You're going to tell me Tom Hanks is bad in Philadelphia? He's amazing in that. Yeah. So there are obviously times where it can work out, but I think you can do it well. And I think a lot of people have done a disservice to diversity and to the community because they were just doing it for the sake of looking like they cared, right? Like when they just cast a bunch of people
and then a bad product comes out.
Exactly. Like they will cast somebody who's black and they'll cast someone who's Muslim, and then everyone in the writer's room is still a white dude. So all the characters just sound like white dudes. Yeah. Because that's the perspective it's coming from. I think the right way to do it is to be diverse in your casting and in your hiring. Be diverse with... If you're trying to make a show that's about someone who's not like you and a group of people who are nothing like you, hire people on the production crew and in the writer's room who resemble these characters so you can get it right. And there's a precedence for that. Even if you just think of it from the standpoint of Conan O'Brien was writing for Bart Simpson on the Simpsons, right? Like they would hire writers to write for a specific character, not just to be in the room writing episodes. It was, you're going to write for this person because I like your voice for that character. You can do the same thing just with real people and not cartoons. Like, we have a Muslim character. Let's get Muslims in the writer's room so that they can write for that character accurately.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think now as a white male, I want to get my perspective out because I'm always muzzled. And so I wish there was some way that a white man could get his word out. But no,
there's always parlor.
You know, not anymore. But you know, like I know I've talked to Trey about this a lot about why, you know, I loved Watchmen. And obviously it was Lindelof that ran that show. But really, and I listened to a lot of interviews with him. He had Ta-Nehisi Coates as one of the writers and person in the room. And if you know Ta-Nehisi, he's an amazing dude. Yeah. And you know, clearly, you know, why, you know, honestly, why I knew about, I know I talked about this before, but why I knew about you know, the Black Wall Street Massacre was from that show, and that was definitely Ta-Nehisi's influence bringing that in. And so he made a really big point to have a diverse writer's room, and it shows. It just shows. It's so obvious. Like when Regina King is so good in it, and I think it's because people write to her and understand her and understood her character.
I was one of the cops who got attacked on the White Knight. So the bad guys, they knew who I was, and they knew where I lived.
And understood, you know, when you're, you know, obviously it's that different perspective and dealing with white racists. It's a really good show. But I think about like one of my other favorite shows. One of them is Atlanta. I love Atlanta, and that's I think that's a completely Black writing room, and I have nothing in common with most of the characters on that show, and I am so engaged by it, and I love it. And it's, you know, it's just absolutely one of my favorite shows. And it goes to show, I think, that when you have an authentic voice and you have something to say, that's a lot more entertaining than just having your, you know, I need to actually check the box for diversity, or I'm just not really listening to diversity because you know, enough people like me have shared ideas, and there's a lot more ideas out there. And when the stuff I think that's really connecting now is you're letting those people have a say. And I think that's at least what I found, stuff that I've really enjoyed is stuff that's a little more authentic. And I was going to say too, like one of my favorite Christmas movies that I've seen lately was Happiest Season. Did you guys see that one?
No.
With Mackenzie,
I've heard good things.
And Kristen Stewart. It's awesome.
I'm so excited. I can't believe I'm finally going to meet everyone.
There's something that we should talk about. I didn't tell my parents I'm gay.
So who do they think I am?
This is Harper's orphan friend, Abby.
So her parents believe their straight daughter brought home her lesbian friend for Christmas?
They also think that I'm straight.
Have they ever met a lesbian?
It's a really good, really funny. I really enjoyed it. It was the Venn diagram where both Megan, my wife, and I could watch it together because it was something we would both like. But you know, it's like, but that was, and it was, I didn't watch it because I was like, well, I got to watch a movie about lesbians at Christmas. It was because I thought it was good and I liked the people in it. And then the voice was great and what they had to say was great in it. And it was just a fun movie. And so, I would rather watch something like that than watch any Hallmark movie ever.
And Rob, you touched on the main word that I always think of as authenticity. And it touches on what Justina or Jason, I forget which of you two, I think Justina said, where so much now is the check off the boxes diversity, where it's like, all right, we got an Asian person, a black person, a gay person, and we just threw in a Muslim. So we've got it. We fixed it. It's done.
Yeah.
But
wait, so diversity is not a problem in Hollywood anymore?
Nope, we solved it.
But there's no actual diversity on the screen because everyone's still the same.
And also, to that, how many times was it like a cast of 5 white people and 1 black dude? It's like, there's your diversity, everybody.
We solved it. We've gotten with the times.
Right.
And either he's written as, man, that's whack, or, or it's
right.
like you said, he sounds like white.
Right.
But even the man that's whack is just this specific, like so much of black characters is this very specific lane. And even Fresh Off the Boat, which was created by the guy that the kid was based on. So it's his life that he's telling. But he wrote an op-ed, and I don't think I ever read the whole thing, but I read snippets. He wrote an op-ed after it was on the air for a little bit. It was still in season 1. And he was lamenting the positives and negatives of that show being on the air. Positives being that it's giving representation, obviously, to Asians. But the negatives being that it's so watered down from what his actual vision of the show was. And he was actually in a meeting with the studio, or with the network. I forget whether it was one or both. But the white folks in the room, he didn't say it this way, these are my words, but the white folks in the room said, can you make the characters more Asian? They're saying this to an Asian man who's writing his life story. Can you make the characters more Asian?
Meaning, can you have more stereotypes that I'm familiar with?
Exactly.
I thought they would talk more street, you know, so...
And so that's a lot of what we're, all of us in whatever minority groups we're a part of are up against. And I was doing some research for a project, I won't name it, but Jason will know what I'm talking about, where I was looking at diversity and how affirmative action has been, and the need for more diversity. And a lot of this research has been talking about how folks who believed in it, like you go back to the 90s when affirmative action was new and the advent of all of this, people who believed in it then are now tired of it because they've heard it preached to them so much that they're like, get away from me with that. And you've got so many people, obviously the last 4 years empowered a lot of people to think that their place in the U.S. or in society in general has been trampled on and they need to regain it. So you've got all of that going on too. And so I think the bigger issue is finding a way to have the discussion without sounding like we're the hall monitors counting your diversity. Like we need to really be real about it. And I think too, so much of the way the conversation is happening on social media is so black and white, when really everything is shades of gray. And so you get where one side is shouting down the other side and nobody's listening, and there's all of this stuff that really needs to be out there and discussed that's not getting talked about. And even people who are well-meaning, who are trying to tell a specific story that could be real, are shouted down, either because it's not diverse enough, but maybe it's still an authentic story, or maybe because it's too diverse and they feel like it's SJW. And so,
or we don't want to be Bradley Whitford from Get Out.
Yeah.
You know, like I always
would have
think about when
voted for him a third time.
No, it's that one. It's when he says to him, he's like, "So how long has this thing been going on between you two?"
So how long has this been going on? This thing.
Yeah.
There's that episode of Scrubs where Turk was talking about how he was meeting some board of director and he was lined up with all the other doctors, and they shook his hand. They shook every white doctor's hand normally, and then they get to Turk and it's like all of the fist bumps and like the dap.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. Hey, what's up, dog?
And so that's how a lot of this is treated, but we don't really get real with any of it. I mean, we as a society, and obviously we're not going to solve it.
Well, right. Well, I do know there are a lot of activists who are on social media who have a lot of good stuff to say, and a lot of people are listening. But I'm noticing that the people who are following them and resharing them are people who are intelligent, weren't really the problem, and were seeking it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who, it's kind of like I always said, like, yeah, there are these driving courses that adults can take, but bad drivers are too arrogant to think that they need it. You know, the people who really need that stuff aren't the ones who seek it out. And that's unfortunately just going to be a problem. And there's got to be some way, like Jerry Seinfeld's wife, I'm forgetting, Jess Seinfeld, right? She has like a cookbook where for cooking for your kids, how to hide veggies and is good stuff for your kids, and they think it's pizza, but it actually has something good in it for them. You got to find some way to slip it in like that.
I think it's just too, it's amplifying when there is something good and authentic. You need to amplify it a lot, and I think that's the one thing is. You know, like, it's amazing that, like, Moonlight and Parasite won. I mean, these are movies, you know, movies that are very different, very non-white, and amazing. And, like, such a different... I would have never known either of those stories. And yet I didn't feel like... I'm like, this is amazing. I love these different points of view, and it's just so well made. And so it's like, I don't know why... You know, it's like amplifying things like that, and, like, the things that are good, I think... encourages people to, okay, you know, it's just like Crazy Rich Asians. That comes out and people are like, maybe we should make some movies about, you know, Asians from their actual perspective, you know, a little bit. So I don't know. You know?
Well, that's the thing. Hollywood's been slow with that sort of thing anyway, because you look at, you go back to the 70s. You had Good Times. You had Jeffersons. You had stuff. You had Sanford and Son. There was stuff. The 80s. And obviously, I'm separating the show from the guy.
We know you're an apologist,
but you've got the Cosby Show. You've got A Different World. You had Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You had stuff that was successful from the 70s through the 90s, and then apparently everyone forgot the lessons that diverse stories can be mainstream, and you got less and less of it. Obviously, it took a while to get My Wife and Kids. And then Blackish years later, and the Tyler Perry stuff.
Bernie Mac show.
Bernie Mac. But it's like, you had to fight and claw to get that stuff on the air. And it goes back to the question, Rob, you asked Justina about Wonder Woman. You ended up getting black people watching maybe bad stuff just to support it, to prove that it can be on the air. And even stuff with women as leads. You had the Alien movies. You had Terminator. You had stuff where females were the lead in these badass type roles, and even all the Sandra Bullock movies. You had all that stuff that for some reason the industry went away from. And I think it's a lot of the same pushback I was talking before about white guys feeling like their space. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of just misogyny as a response to that. It's like all these people are like, women aren't funny, they're not good in comedies, and then you go back to 1982 or whenever it was when 9 to 5 came out. It was the second highest grossing movie of that year, second only to Return of the Jedi, and ahead of Stir Crazy. That's a comedy that stars 3 women, and people just seem to, I don't know, they play dumb, or they have short-term memory about this stuff.
That gun of mine, and I'm gonna change you from a rooster to a hen with one shot.
You know, it's the same thing about, you know, like they said that like Denzel Washington doesn't do well overseas, so I give him a franchise. It's like, because he's one of the best actors ever. So like,
right.
I watched that guy reading I don't care how many movies he made with Tony Scott. I'll watch them all because I love him.
And those same people will say that will overlook how well it'll do on TNT or whatever.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Like, they'll make another Mark Wahlberg movie with Peter Berg.
Exactly. So. Even though that movie's going to have the same sort of box office success and then TV success. So then we'll be like, well, it does well on TV. It does well on video. It's like, so do all these Denzel Washington movies.
So I was working at ESPN in programming during that period of time when they branched out into scripted stuff. And so we were having a staff meeting about where we were brainstorming different stuff and presenting different ideas. And it was mostly white people in the room, but it was me and a couple of other black people, and we were the ones who were just fighting for this one. Well, I'll get to that part of the story. So the point is, they were talking about all these different people who presented ideas for shows to ESPN, scripted shows, and Thomas Shalami was one of them. co-creators of The West Wing, and I forget some of the other names. Then they brought up Spike Lee wants to do a TV series version of He Got Game.
My God.
And my friend and I were at opposite ends of the room, but we were both in the, oh my God, this would be amazing.
Jesus.
And the stuff that people started saying, and by the way, let me say up front, my experience at ESPN was great. People were not racist. They treated me well. They were actually supporters of mine when I was doing Black History Month initiatives. So this just tells you where the different voices are that important. Because these are open-minded people who were saying, yeah, but the concern we have with Spike Lee is, do we think he'd be able to deliver on a TV schedule? It's like, dude, this is Spike Lee. He delivers, he delivers all the time.
All the basketball players of that era that could have been on the show.
Right. I was vocal about this point. It's like, but it's Spike Lee. He's delivered on all of his movies. He's come in on budget and on time. And why would we all of a sudden question whether or not he'd be able to hit the TV schedule? And I don't think he was the only film director, by the way, on the list. But he's the only one where they question, can he do a TV schedule?
Yeah.
And so then some people on the side were trying to explain to me why there's the concern. And they were like, and his movie, it's not like his movies were the super blockbusters. I was like, what?
Right. It was one of the most successful independent movies.
It's a very infuriating story.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is what is happening in these boardrooms all the time. I had... Well, there's another story I'll have to tell you after the podcast.
Tell us later.
Because I can't. This one is putting too much on blast.
Right.
But the point is, that's what's happening. And there are these shows where we've heard recently, like All Rise is a show I'd watch, and I'll mention it again at the end, I'm sure. But All Rise, I like it. I watched the entire first season, then I read these articles about how some of the minority casts were quitting because of racist to them type stories, and I say to them, not to say I don't believe it, because I do believe them, but other people involved with the show didn't see it that way, and so they were pulling. There are all these examples that I don't remember from the article now, but examples of things that they fought hard to get taken out of scripts because it made some of the diverse cast look stereotypical. And ways in which they wouldn't act this way based on their backgrounds. And because it was such a fight all season, they quit. So I'm like, man, they must have done a phenomenal job, because the show that was on the air is not the crap that was in this article that they had to pull out. They needed, I understand why they would want to quit, because if they're not being listened to and not being treated that way. But man, they need to stay on the show to keep the show from going that way.
Yeah.
Because that's a good show. And like, to me, it's a strong black woman who, and I'll evoke the Cosby Show again. I think one thing that was done well about that show, and I see about All Rise also, is that these were truly authentically black characters who don't go around saying, I'm a black character. And whereas another right way to do it is a Different World or Black Lightning, Luke Cage, where the term that was used, that what's her name, Jamel Hill used to describe Luke Cage was unapologetically black, which is right. They're very authentic. It's not stereotypically black. It's authentically black and unapologetically so. And there are all these different shades, no pun intended, to how blackness exists. And all of that needs to be displayed.
Yeah.
And I thought that All Rise did that in a good way with the black and Hispanic and
well, it
Asian.
reminds me of that song in CB4, the Chris Rock movie. And I'm black, y'all. And I'm black, y'all. And I'm blackity, blackity, black, y'all. There's a guy just like overdoing it to be like, I'm black. And it's, of course, making fun of the productions where people were overdoing it in this. It's like the opposite of it's on the same sort of path of stereotypical. You know, it's like one is supposed to be positive, the other is supposed to be negative, but this is people trying too hard to evoke something positive instead of something real.
Oh, we did not solve it. I see. Long way to go. Spiking the ball at the 50-yard line. Yeah, sure. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up with talking about something we would recommend you watch or skip. And Rob, why don't you start us off?
Well, I'm going to go with my watch. And unfortunately, there is a lot of white people in this, but I feel like I should have. But it's just the last thing that I watched, and I truly just loved was Ted Lasso. I finally got a new iPhone, and so part of getting a new iPhone is you get to watch Apple TV. So I was like, well, let's do this finally, and kind of big spender here. And so I finally had to watch it, and I binged it in one night, very regretfully binged it in one night.
Well, I got a Apple product almost a year ago, and my Apple TV Plus is about to run out, so I have to binge that. What's your skip?
Skip, I'm just gonna say this because I don't know if there's a lot of David Ayer fans out there, but I watched The Tax Collector last night with Shia LaBeouf. And I don't know the main actor's guy. I've never seen him before. I'd say skip that one. You know, just watch Training Day. Just, just don't, or maybe end of watch if you like David Ayer, but like, just, maybe just watch Training Day again. You know, you don't really need to keep rehashing that same story over and over again.
Justina, do you have a recommendation for watching or skipping or both?
Yes, I have one for both. For watching, there's this show. It's a British show. It's called How the Other Kids Live, and it's a reality show, but it's awesome. And it's about these kids that have play dates with other kids. There's always 3 that have different backgrounds, whether that's family income or religion or anything. And man, it's awesome. And like all the kids are like this really fun age, like between 8 and 10 years old, which is just like tons of personality. And honestly, it like fits into this conversation because like we're talking about diversity and exposure, and like they're like getting these 8-year-olds in it, and it's kind of interesting to see how they react. It's awesome. I watched it on YouTube. I don't know what other sources there are to watch it, but it's called How the Other Kids Live, and it's really awesome. And then if you're going to skip something, I would recommend skipping the last 2 or 3 seasons of Veep. It really left a bad taste in my mouth, and that show's so amazing. And then seasons, like I like even like the last episode, I started to watch it with my mom while we were here in South Carolina, and like I couldn't. It like made me feel weird because like I know how it ends, and it's so terrible to me.
And that's why I haven't, because of how I Met Your Mother ended. My watching the syndicated episodes went away.
Yeah, Justina, so to your point, what happened to Veep is very similar to what happened to The West Wing.
Yeah.
And what happened to Supernatural is that the original person who created it, who was writing it, left the show, and it was a caricature of itself. And Veep, it was more like when Dan Harmon was kicked out of Community. It was like, more like
we know the way they did it, so let's just do it. And it's like, but you gotta think the way he thinks.
Yeah, like they were vulgar in the original episodes with the original guy, but it was, to use the word authentic again, it was authentic to that world and those characters. And later, it was just they were cursing to be vulgar.
But my only counterpoint to this is just the fact that there's this scene where they're like, "Stop the steal! Stop counting the votes!" And they're like, "No, we want to keep counting the votes. Keep counting the votes."
Counting every valid vote.
You got count toast the votes.
Rally the crowd with your pro-POTUS signs and get your camera and friendly faces on TV.
Yes.
What do we want to get the votes counted? When do we want it? Hopefully before the deadline.
The count will continue.
The new votes are tilting heavily toward O'Brien. Most of them are military absentees.
I'm going to be the first elected lady president. So you guys have to stop
the recount.
Ma'am, we can't.
I don't care.
The train has very publicly left the station and derailed at high speed.
No, you gotta stop the count.
We would like to file a motion to exclude all pending ballots from the recount.
You do realize that what you're saying is in diametric opposition to the case you presented yesterday.
It was so prescient. It just because that's what was going. You have in Detroit, stop the counting, and then in Arizona, they're like, keep counting. It's like so. It was really funny to me. I was like,
yeah,
Lord,
I will echo that those last few seasons are rough, but there were a couple of characters who remained strong to the end, and it's Craig,
Ryan, man.
who was played by Gary Cole, and Sam Richardson's character. Both were amazing any season of that show. But yeah, what was happening overall was not as good.
Because the other characters, maybe Gary less so, but the other characters were cartoons of themselves.
Yeah, agreed.
They weren't really who they were, because they actually cared about running the country well and doing good things in the first few seasons. They were just bad at it, and their egos got in the way. And Reed's what's his name? The one who was dating and kind of off and on Anna Klumsky's character. That guy. He was maybe arguably next to Anna Klumsky the most capable of the staffers
right
in the beginning.
Dan.
And later they just made him this like Dan. Yes, Dan. You know, he was just the sex addict guy who not addict, but sex guy who
power hungry,
but without the depth.
Right.
Because he was
I will
always
say I hated
hungry,
that character the moment he was really shitty to Tony Hale's character in that first episode. And I was like, oh, I hope they don't show this guy a lot, because I hate him because he was mean to Buster.
Was there like an espresso thing, a little podule or anything like that?
Fucking Christ, put the little pod in the fucking hole, shut the fucking lid, hit the fucking button for 2 fucking seconds. Oh, it's so easy.
What is your recommendation, Trey?
So I actually will recommend All Rise until the racism of the showrunner. No, I'm joking about that part. But it's remained good. I've watched all the way up to the last episode. And I think that it's handled COVID well and real without hitting us over the head with it. And they did a great at-home episode to close out season 1 that I think helped solidify us getting a season 2. So, you know, I would definitely recommend that. And stay away from New Trek. Unless it's Lower Decks. Lower Decks, the cartoon, is actually good.
Okay.
But anything else that's coming out of the Trek world, I watch it. I hate watch it because it's part of a franchise I love. But stay away from it. It's stupid, schlocky, doesn't make any sense. We think we're hitting the beats, but this is actually dumb sci-fi kind of stuff.
Yeah, just watch Red Letter Media's take on it, and
they're not even watching Trek anymore because of how bad Picard was. This is the guy
just watch what they did do, and then don't watch anything else. Yeah. Now, I think you should watch this. This is my recommendation. It's not new. The last episode of the show was over 20 years ago, almost 30, I guess, and it's on YouTube. But it's Bob Ross, okay? Just take in something happy and nice at least once a day, and I suggest Bob Ross because it's just wholesome. And my skip is All Rise. No, I'm kidding. No, I'd never really watched it. I've just seen it when Trey was watching it, and the other day he was watching. I was like, man, every scene, someone's just really mad at somebody else. But that was just the 5 minutes.
Kind of that episode,
right?
Yeah.
But my skip would be NCIS Los Angeles. I have only seen the opening scene of an episode, and then the like 5 seconds into their intro, their credits intro, and it was so laughably bad and ridiculous. I'll just try to go through this quickly, but there was basically a scene where 2 of the cops were trying to catch some killers or whoever, and they were in a van driving in an alley straight towards the 2 cops. like pedal to the metal. And there's a homeless man who was in the way of this van hitting them, and one of the cops went like, "Oh, get out of the way, get out of the way." Oh, he's not hearing me, so he starts like running, and they of course like do slow-mo, but the van wasn't that far from the homeless man, and the cop ran up, grabs the homeless guy, and he doesn't do the dive like is in every movie where it's like dive and gets the person out of the way. He just grabs him and then kind of runs him out of the way. And I'm like, so are we just watching The Flash now? Is that what this is? Does this guy have a superpower?
Because that car was going at a good speed.
It could not... It couldn't happen. This could not happen in real life unless he's the Flash. And for some reason, this show doesn't highlight the fact that the Flash is one of their characters.
I never really talked to you about this before, but I'm pretty sure my defense is, if I were to get a divorce from my wife, is the Mark Harmon defense, which is I've had to watch so many episodes of NCIS on accident because she loves that show. And I'm like, how can you love that show? And we usually get into a fight over NCIS. And so
Trey and my mom watch NCIS, and I'm not into them.
She stopped watching the original, but she's into New Orleans. I watched both the original and New Orleans.
I like Scott Bakula, so for that reason, I'm not a hater on New Orleans, but there are a couple of characters on there who's like,
I watched New Orleans for like a second. He was like, "Oh, come and try my gumbo. Oh, we got to solve this crime." And also, just I want to say one thing about it is, how are there so many freaking murders in the Navy and Marine Corps that they have to have these people researching it all the time? There can't be that many murders. If there were that many murders in the military, that would be on CNN every day. Like, what the fuck is up with the fact that people keep murdering Marines? Like, and not in the wartime, but like in a golf course.
These are
I watched every story guy hits a golf ball and blows up.
These are actual divisions of the real agency, Rob. They even had the agency in A Few Good Men back when it was still called NIS.
And you know what? And that was a rare thing that they did the Code Red, and Santiago was killed.
The Code Red was rare. Death in the Navy and an investigation from a criminal service is not the rare part.
Did you order the Code Red?
Code Red.
But we're here. So the reason I laughed so hard when Jason named it Skip is in literally moments before this episode aired that Jason's describing, I saw it was about to come on, and I said, man, compared to the original in New Orleans, Los Angeles is just so cartoonish. Like, it's something about how they execute it where it just doesn't seem real. Like, even just shooting guns and everything.
Oh, yeah. I also left out that the guy's partner just started opening fire at the van while he was running towards the van to get a man who was also in front of the van. What are you doing shooting in that direction? Oh, it was so bad. And then the trailer, the credits started, the intro, and there's this explosion. Look, just go to YouTube.
The same guy who ran to get the guy is exploded into the sky, but is in one piece. And the explosion looks like a cartoon explosion.
Just go to YouTube and look up season 13 NCIS Los Angeles intro. You will see what I'm talking about, and then go to Bob Ross's channel.
This scene wasn't even what I was thinking about when I called it cartoonish, because I didn't know about it. I haven't watched the show in a while, and this character's new to me. I knew of this scene where LL Cool J was jumping away from an explosion that was in the beginning credits.
Yeah, ladies do love Cool James, especially when you call yourself cool.
Yeah. When someone was like, had that dartboard, they're like, well, NCIS is a hit, so we can't find another Mark Harmon. He's a real lightning in the bottle actor. What can we do? Oh, who was the guy in Batman Forever? Oh, Chris O'Donnell. Oh, yeah. Who can he pair up with really well? Who'd have great chemistry with? LL Cool J.
In defense of the two actors, because They do work well together. The show, not so much. The two guys work well together.
Yeah, it's kind of like I watched The Voice mainly for Adam and Blake. Okay, well, thanks everyone for
coming on. We could go on.
You need to watch LL Cool J, okay?
My hat is like a shark, yeah.
Yes.
Or watch him in Halloween H2O. If you want to be mad at a franchise burning itself to the ground, but LL being in it.
Well, thanks everyone for coming on to talk all that pop.
Can we do recommendations?
Rob,
or
do you want to do the honors?
Well, I gotta do some plugs, brah.
Okay. Oh, yes.
I got a plug, bro.
I know what you're going to plug. Go ahead. Yeah, this is the first time ever that we've had a guest do the plugs. I feel like this is an episode of Comedy Bang Bang, especially because of the length of the episode. Rob, plug it away.
So other best friends of the show, Clay Haddon and Jim Hendricks and I have started a band, and we are called The Socks, which stands for Stuff Our Kids Say. And we are making kids music, and we're trying to make kids music that's decent or good. And so we've got a YouTube channel. It's The Socks. We've got a Facebook page. It's The Socks. We've got a Twitter account. It's Donald J. Trump. No, sorry. It's The Socks. And then all
the links of that will be in the bio.
And to check it out, we've got a song about the Mandalorian, and it's pretty good. So,
oh, this is the way. Oh, this is the way. I said, oh, this is the way.
I mean, if I'm gonna toot my own horn, I play the guitar, but I guess I could toot a horn. I don't know. Like, there it is. There it is. There it is. Trey likes NCIS New Orleans.
Quantum Leap was my favorite. I like Scott Bakula.
Just watch Major League 3, bro.
Oh, man. That or Necessary Roughness.
Necessary Roughness is where it's at. Welcome to Football. Enjoy the big game. There it is.
Oh boy.
And I love a good Quantum Leap reference just as much as anyone. Why don't you check out what Rob was talking about at the end there, The Socks, and they are on YouTube. We have a link to them in the bio. Subscribe to their channel. They got tons of subscribers. And that's going well. Got fun songs, so go check those out. Don't forget, you can also check out what we got going on at thereitispod.com and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at thereitispod. And we have a YouTube. We are posting stuff on Thursdays. You can go to youtube.com/thereitis. Teresa Lowe is our guest next week. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.